All right, welcome to episode 19 of the Learning React in 2021 series. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about the cleanup function for useEffect to fix this specific error. We're going to talk about conditional rendering of components and scroll restoration. So let's jump into this error first of all. Now, this is something that started appearing in the previous episode where we were jumping around from component to component. We were doing searches and then jumping between these different sections. And this error would occasionally appear. Like, it was rare, but it would occasionally appear. The problem is, as you can see, it talks about can't perform a React state update on an unmounted component. So what is an unmounted component? Well, when you're rendering something, you're mounting it. When the code thinks that you should remove the component, that's unmounting it. And every time you're re-rendering, you have to remove the old version before you add the new one. So changing a state variable during this reloading process often comes down to something happening inside of useEffect. So inside of our useEffect on planets, and since the code on planets, people, and films is all pretty much the same, we're going to be having the same issue on all of these. Just, it all depends on our fetches, when we say that we're finished loading, and if we're doing a re-render while, let's jump into our code here. If we go into people, for example, if we look inside of here, we've got a useEffect. So inside people, we're tracking loaded, setting it to false. Down inside the page, we've got a spinner that we're showing. That's the overlay that blinks. We're showing that if it's not loaded yet. We want to be able to set it to true. So we're tracking the changes on list to say, okay, if list length is greater than 0, we've got some data, set it to true, and then the spinner disappears. Well, every once in a while with this error, what we're getting is actually the loader never goes away. This status doesn't change. And it all has to do with the sequence of things that are happening. We're using set timeout in here. That is absolutely in effect. That is what this is all about, this useEffect. We're running this function that's inside of useEffect. We're running that code every time the people function runs. So the people function runs, we render this stuff, what gets returned. We're rendering that content, but it is possible that this timeout still is running in the background. And if that thing is still running in the background when we remove people, and then the timer goes off and it tries to call set loaded, and it's in between renders, that's when this error is taking place. So we want to get rid of that problem. So inside of useEffect, something we haven't done yet. I think I've mentioned it a few times, but we haven't actually done one. There is a cleanup function. If inside of your useEffect, if you return a function like this, that function runs every time there is a re-render taking place. Now, this useEffect runs when the component initially loads, yes. When list runs, when list changes, the value of list changes, this runs again. That's a change in a value here that can trigger a re-render. So every time this is about to be re-rendered, when it needs to wrap up and remove the stuff that was there before to replace it with the new stuff, it's going to want to do a cleanup. So inside of here, what we want to do is we want to get rid of this timeout. So there's no longer an effect. There's no longer code that's sitting somewhere ready to run and our component's gone. So what we're going to do inside of here, get rid of that one. I want to run this, but I need to have a reference to this timeout so I can kill it inside of here. I want to be able to say clear timeout. This is just vanilla JavaScript, and we're going to have a variable called Timmy. So we want to get rid of the timer that we assign to Timmy here. And to be able to access it there, I'm going to declare it outside the if statement. There we go. So I've got Timmy. I'm assigning the reference to that timer to Timmy. And if this happens, it means that this function is running before this was finished, before the setLoaded function was called. So that is going to get rid of our problem here. And I'm just going to copy this, and we're going to put the same code in films and planets as well. So right in here, there's the set timeout for films, for people, and let's put it in planets. There we go. So with that done, we'll clear this, refresh, everything's brand new. I go to films, I go to people, I go to planets. We're good. I go into here and I jump. I go into one of these and I jump. I do a search and I jump over here. I do a search and I jump over here. So all of our data is being fetched, brought back, whether we're doing searches, whether we're doing selection of things, jumping back and forth, and I'm never getting that error about the timer because we are now getting rid of all these timers before the next render takes place. So setLoaded is never being called after we've unmounted the component. And that's the whole purpose behind these cleanup functions that we put inside of useEffect, is to make sure that there's no code that is still attached to our component that can run after we've unmounted. Okay, so we've got that. One other little adjustment that I'd like to make in here is I want to have something that runs, like right now, we've got this, as long as it's not loaded, we're going to display the spinner. Okay, if the fetch comes back, no problem. 300 milliseconds later, we set it to true and the spinner's gone. But what about those situations where the fetch is taking a really long time, or maybe the fetch is failing, we just don't get that response yet, we're not sure if it's going to work? What I would like to do is I would like to remove this and just have the person be able to see this. Now we can still get the result. Maybe after 10 seconds the result actually comes back and then it renders and it replaces no planets with the actual data. When the list runs, great, no problem. It's going to have no problem getting rid of the timer. But I want to add something in here where I say else. So useEffect, when the list gets updated, when there's a re-render, or when the page initially loads, which is what's going to be happening here. So this is on initial render. I want to be able to get rid of spinner after a default time. I don't want a permanent spinner on the page. I want it to show no content, no planets, no people, no films, whatever it is. So we're going to do the same thing we did above. I'm just going to use a much longer timeout. So it's one or the other of these things that are going to happen. And this one, I don't know, let's say 3.9 seconds after the page initially loads, we're going to get rid of the spinner, even if it's still there. After 3.9 seconds, if it's still there, if the fetch results are not back yet, I'm going to hide the timer and have it say no planets or no people. Now, this value that I chose right here, this should be basically the same thing as what I'm saying to my Axios call, my fetch call. I'm going to give up after a certain amount of time. So if we jump into, where is it here? Our use Star Wars hook. Inside of here, in the config object, when we're calling go get planets, people, films, whatever it is, params is one of the objects, but there's another parameter that we can put inside of here called timeout. And I'm going to say after 5 seconds, after 4 seconds, something like that. Let's make it 4 seconds. After 4 seconds, give up. Don't cancel the call. I don't need this anymore. I'm going to assume it didn't work. After 4 seconds, if I don't have the data, something's gone wrong. And in films, planets, there it is. So here, just before that, or we could even use the exact same time. There we go. And I'm just going to add this into the other pages. So we've got it for planets, we have it for people, and we're going to have it for films. So now, if there is some long delay for fetching some of that data on the initial load or whatever, we jump in here, we have it, we got all the results. But if it did take a long time, then it's going to give up after that amount of time. Now, I just picked 4 seconds arbitrarily. You'll have to think about the amount of data, how fast your API works, and all those things, and what's the speed of connection that people are going to have on average when coming to your website. Lots of things to consider, but we've got this working. Now, 2 other sort of related things. One is, on the homepage, we still have this search, but we are not in a category. We don't have a related search. So what I want to do is I want to hide the search bar if I'm on the home page. Have it only appear when I'm on one of these. So that is going to be back up here in our app. This is where we're rendering the search bar. I only want to show the search bar if I'm not on the home page. So how do I get that? Well, in the app, we're getting path name right here from use location. And I'm going to save path name. I'm going to call it category, and I'm going to pass that down. Category is equal to path name dot split, and it's going to be part 1 of that path name, because path name is going to be slash or slash planets or people, or it could be slash planets slash some number like that. By doing split, we've got here blank and blank, or blank and planets, or blank planets and 45. So there's 2 parts for the first one, 2 parts for the second one, 3 parts for this one. So part 1 is the part in the middle. It comes after the first slash. That part, if it's empty, I'm on home. If there's something there, I'm on planets or people or films. So this category, I'm going to take that category and I'm going to come down here and we can use it. Like inside of here, we can say category and this. So curly brace at the beginning, curly brace at the end. This is my expression. I'm going to say only render this if there is a category. And you may think, well, there's always a category, but if we're on home, it's an empty string. Basically, it's undefined. So that is a falsy value. And here I am on the home. It's not there. I go to films, it's there. People, it's there. Planets, it's there. But back on the home page, it just doesn't show up. Okay, and the last thing that I want to show you is scroll restoration. Scroll restoration is the technical term for situations where I'm in a single page application here with React. That's what we're building. So the browser never really thinks of us as actually loading a new page. Sure, we're changing what's written up here, but we're not loading the entire thing all over again unless I come up here and I hit enter. Then we're actually loading the website. But on a single page application, I could click on films or people. When I do that, I'm hiding the films component, the list component, and I'm showing the people list component. I'm just hiding and showing different parts of my HTML. I want to be able to deal with situations where this content is really, 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 really long, and I've scrolled way down the page, and when I click on something different here, I want to be able to make that switch and jump back to the top, not just stay at the bottom. So let's come in here and throw in some extra content inside of people. we have our list here that we're doing this, and I'm going to come in here after the list and just add some content like this. Now I'm holding down Alt and Shift, or Option and Shift, and arrow down. There we go. People's got a whole bunch. If I go to planets, I can do the exact same thing. Okay, I've just added a whole bunch of filler content so I can scroll way down. Now what happens if there's a link here that takes me to another component? I don't want to be way down here at the bottom. I want to be back at the top when I jump to planets. So if I click on this, what I'm going to do here is at the bottom of this, I'm going to create a nav link, and I'm going to say, I want to go from here to people. Like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other page to jump from people to planets. All right, people, planets. So I'm jumping back and forth between these two pages, but I'm down at the bottom. I want to be back at the top when I switch from one to the next. It's actually a very, very simple fix. I'm just going to go into my main component here. Inside the function where we were calling setPeopleFilmsPlanets to update that content. Actually, now that we've done this, we can even remove the async. We don't need the async in there anymore. Inside of here, after I've updated setPeopleFilms or planets with the new keyword for a search, useEffect also works on the initial render, and that's when we're going to be doing this. On the initial render or after a search, we want to do this. And this is just vanilla JavaScript. We're going to go to the very top. Scroll to position 00, X and Y values. Top left corner of the screen. We're scrolling all the way to the top every time this useEffect runs. And this useEffect runs every time the function main runs, which is every time we're rendering this component. So inside the useEffect, that's where we're doing this. Back inside of here, I go to people. I'm back at the top. Go to planets. I'm back at the top. Every time we do, we're just scrolling to the top at the same time as hiding and showing things. And that's scroll restoration. All right, so if you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comments. I answer as many as I have time for. And as always, thanks for watching.